This video contains full spoilers for Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 and the rest of the Tomorrowverse. Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2 is the second part of a trilogy of DC animated movies that will be capping off the Tomorrowverse in 2024. Seeing as the story brings together the entire DC Multiverse, it was expected that many characters will be appearing, and while Part 1 featured over 100 characters, Part 2 features a little bit under 80, including a few newly introduced characters, meaning there are a lot of characters, around 40, who appeared in Part 1 or maybe in the past Tomorrowverse movies, who did not appear in Part 2. Because of that, this time around, the missing section, which is the last one, will be a lot larger. Before that though, I'll be going over every character who appeared and had lines, then every character who appeared without lines, then every character who was only mentioned, all in order of appearance. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, help me get to 100,000 subscribers, and let's begin. Starting off with characters who had lines, and yet again skipping the intro because those aren't actually characters. This time around, the movie did not start off with the main character like Part 1 did, rather the first character to appear was Commissioner James Gordon, specifically the Earth 2 version, which means it's a newly introduced character who didn't say anything per se, but did laugh and grunted, so I'm counting it. It's not clear if he was voiced by Bill Burke, who voiced his Earth 1 counterpart, or not. What is clear is that he died, and it seemed like no one cared, not even his own daughter. Bruce Wayne, aka Batman of Earth 1, plays a large role in his 6th appearance in the Tomorrowverse, plus one more appearance in Just a Picture in a 7th movie, played again by Jensen Ackles. This movie does not actually reveal anything about Batman that I can recall, so let's move on to Earth 2 Joker, which makes his debut and looks and sounds exactly like his Earth 1 counterpart. Like his Earth 1 counterpart, he's voiced by Troy Baker, and he's probably never going to appear again. The Bat family of Earth 2 then come in, including returning characters from Part 1 like Dick Grayson aka Robin in his 2nd appearance, again voiced by Zach Callison, Helena Wayne aka the Huntress in her 2nd appearance, played again by Erica Ishii, as well as Barbara Gordon aka Batgirl in her 2nd appearance, this time given lines, and voiced by Gideon Aldon, who also voiced Barbara in the Elseworlds movie Batman: The Doom That Came to Gotham, which may very well take place in the Tomorrowverse multiverse. There's no reason why it wouldn't. What's weird about Barbara is that she doesn't seem to care that her father died, which can be attributed to them just not bothering to deal with that on screen, but it also makes me think that maybe she's not from Earth 2 but rather Earth 1, as Barbara Gordon did appear in Batman: The Long Halloween, although way younger, and we've never seen her as Batgirl, so that remains unclear. That actually opens the door for another character to potentially not be from Earth 2. Terry McGinnis, aka Batman, appears for the first time in the Tomorrowverse, voiced by Will Friedle, the iconic voice of the original Batman Beyond. It's possible and it seems likely he's from Earth 2, given that the Earth 2 Batman died and so he'd be the successor, but it's also, I think, entirely possible he's the actual Terry McGinnis of the DCAU/Earth 12. Also debuting here is Damian Wayne, aka Robin, who does seem like he's also from Earth 2, although that would mean that Earth 2 has 2 Robins. Still, that is entirely possible. While it's unclear who voiced Damian Wayne because it doesn't show up in the credits, based on the voice, it's possible that Stuart Allen returned from the DCAMU to voice Damian again, or maybe because Zach Callison is actually credited as playing Robin, not necessarily Dick Grayson, maybe he played both Dick and Damian Wayne. That brings us to the first appearance of one of the main characters of this movie, arguably the main villain actually, Charles Holstead, aka the Psycho-Pirate of Earth 2, voiced by Jeffrey Arend in his 3rd appearance, or rather actually his 4th appearance, as it's revealed that the events of DC Showcase Blue Beetle is the actual Earth 4 of the Tomorrowverse, and that the Dr. Spectro who appeared there was actually Charles Holstead of Earth 2, assimilating to the more ridiculous world that is Earth 4. We'll talk about it a bit more when I get to Blue Beetle. This movie leaves Psycho-Pirate off with a portion of the Monitor's power and working with the Anti-Monitor. In his debut scene, Psycho-Pirate is talking to Earth 2's Kent Nelson, aka Dr. Fate, making his 2nd appearance in the Tomorrowverse, but this time in his full Dr. Fate glory for the first time, again voiced by Keith Ferguson. It was hinted in his 1st appearance that Dr. Fate was aware of the crisis to come and brought Flash to Earth 2 because of it, so that he would inspire Flash to form the Justice League. This movie fully confirms it, as he mentions that Psycho-Pirate has a role to play in the crisis to come, and even gives Psycho-Pirate the ability to traverse between worlds because of it. Marnovu, aka the Monitor, is another one of the main characters of this movie who comes from an unknown universe and returns for his 2nd and seemingly final appearance. Voiced again by Jonathan Adams, this movie reveals his name is Marnovu. He's billions of years old, is from an ancient race of aliens who monitor the multiverse but don't interfere, and accidentally saved Kara Zor-El from her death, only to then become her adopted father, and the reason for why she didn't age during the time that Clark Kent grew up to become Superman. The Monitor ends the movie dying at the hands origins of Supergirl, who was manipulated by the Psycho-Pirate, who was manipulated by the Anti-Monitor, but it's hinted that he actually caused somehow this crisis, maybe because he created the Anti-Monitor. We'll probably find out in part 3, meaning he actually probably will appear again in part 3. Supergirl was actually saved by Satellite, the Monitor's AI companion, who can be considered a character in his own right, and if so, it could be considered an original character, as the Monitor's Satellite was nothing more than a ship in the comics. It's unclear who voiced Satellite, what universe he's from, or its current status, as it doesn't really appear in the present day scenes in this movie, but actually did appear in the present day scenes in part 1, so it's unclear what exactly happened to it. The third and final main character in part 2, or if you count Psycho-Pirate as a main villain, then the second main character of part 2 is Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, aka Harbinger of Earth 1. In her fourth appearance, voiced again by Meg Donnelly, Supergirl's backstory is expanded upon here and combined with Harbinger's as previously mentioned. She surprisingly survives the movie in spite of her big death in the comics, but that may very well still happen in part 3. But she also survives the movie with a portion of the Monitor's power bestowed to her, which turned her into Harbinger, and basically every Harbinger related story from the comics is simply given to her. Allura Inze, Kara's mother, appears briefly in already seen footage from Legion of Superheroes, before then also appearing in a hallucination where she actually has a line, and voiced by Jennifer Hale, technically appearing for the second time. The aforementioned Kal-El, aka Clark Kent, aka Superman of Earth 1, is voiced by Darren Criss, and returns for his sixth and arguably least significant appearance, as he really doesn't do much in this movie, but I predict he'll have a huge focus in the main character role in part 3. If he doesn't, that would be a crying shame. Like Allura Inze, Quirrell Dox, aka Brainiac 5, returns very briefly in already seen footage, but then again in the aforementioned hallucination voiced by Harry Shum Jr. Based on the information relayed to us in this movie, my theory that the Legion of Superheroes will be revealed to come from an alternate universe, not Earth 1's future, is seemingly untrue. Dawn Star also appears, but later on in the movie, and has no line, so I'll get back to her later. Earth 2 Kal-El, aka Clark Kent, aka Superman, voiced by Darren Criss, appears for the third time, and similarly to his Earth 1 counterpart, does not have a very large role, but probably will, and definitely should in part 3. Michael Holt, aka Mr. Terrific, appears for the second time, voiced by Ado Asando, and can be either from Earth 1 or 2, it still remains unclear. Ted Kord, aka Blue Beetle, is voiced by Matt Lanter, hails from Earth 4, and appears for what we now know to be his third time. I did not mention it in the previous video because it wasn't confirmed, but there was a short called DC Showcase Blue Beetle, which featured Ted Kord, also voiced by Matt Lanter, in a universe that featured only Charlton Comics characters or Earth 4 characters, including the Question and the original version of Captain Atom. It seemed like it was the Tomorrowverse versus Earth 4. I mean, the Question and Blue Beetle were both voiced by the same actor, although Captain Atom had a bit of a different design, so I wasn't sure, but it's now been confirmed through the interaction between Blue Beetle and Psycho-Pirate that revealed that Psycho-Pirate was Dr. Spectro, as I previously mentioned. The Aquaman of the fully Atlantean world of Earth 146 returns for his second appearance, voiced again by Liam McIntyre. Kimiya Hoshi, aka Dr. Light, likely from Earth 1, returns for her second appearance as well, voiced by Erika Ishii. Stana Katic reprises a role as Diana of Themyscira, aka Wonder Woman of Earth 2, for the fourth time. She calls Hippolyta her adopted mother, or at the very least she calls an alternate universe version of Hippolyta her adopted mother, which hasn't really been the case for any other version of the character unless you consider the Clay origin as Hippolyta not being her biological mother, but then again, it's the closest thing to a mother she would have. Regardless, Diana spends her last moments on the Amazonian-led world of Earth 46, which she seemingly dies alongside, although it's hinted that she, of all characters, could potentially be capable of surviving that, and I hope she does, because this was an underwhelming death. Shiera Hall, aka Hawkgirl, appears for the third time, voiced again by Jamie Gray Hyder. Earth 17 is showcased at one point, and through that we meet the Atomic Knights, which consists of 3 members that we know of, one of whom actually talks. The one that talks is either Gardner Gale, aka Atomic Knight, or Captain Adam Strange, although the former is more likely considering he's not voiced by the same voice actor as Adam Strange, and he does look a bit more like an actual knight, which is more close to the Gardner Gale version of the character. He's voiced instead by Keith Ferguson. Kamandi, voiced by Will Friedle, returns for the 4th time. Another theory was that Commandy's world is actually the future of Earth 2, this movie debunks that, as Commandy is sent back to his own world, which has a different tower than Earth 2's, meaning he comes from the actual Earth AD like the comics. It remains unrevealed how Commandy got to the 1940s Earth 2 and how he knew to give Superman his costume. Maybe that will be a story that we see him go through in Part 3. Solivar, appearing for the second time, is revealed to be from Earth 1 and this time is given lines, voiced by Darren DePaul. He does not survive to the end of the movie. Vic Sage, aka The Question, is from Earth 4, voiced for the third time by David Kaye, also his third appearance, and is absolutely hilarious. Hatar Hol, aka Hawkman, likely from Earth 1, appears briefly, yet again being given just one line like his previous appearance, voiced by Jeffrey Arend. Mara McCabe, aka Vixen, appears for the third time, voiced by Keisha Sharp, also in her smallest role, which is a bit of a recurring theme. Similarly is Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow of Earth 1, who appears for the third time in by far his smallest role yet, voiced by Jimmy Simpson. In an actual larger role compared to Part 1 is John Stewart, aka Green Lantern of Earth 1, appearing for the third time, voiced by Aldous Hodge. John does not remain a Green Lantern though, as he sacrifices his powers to defeat the Shadow Demons. Although, like I said in my review for this movie, it never for a second felt like it was necessary to do that. He did also contribute by bringing John Constantine back to his former glory, although that moment was also kinda dumb, like a Martha moment. Anyway, go watch my review to hear me rant about it. One of the few characters to debut in this movie is one of the characters that I mentioned was missing from Part 1, the main villain of the trilogy, the Anti-Monitor, voiced by Otto Asando, who seemed to be purely motivated by his hatred of the Monitor, and also didn't actually have a name or know what a name was until Psycho Pyro called him the Anti-Monitor, or rather the Anti-Monitor. I just don't like how that sounds compared to Anti-Monitor, so that means that he probably wasn't named Mobius. The Shadow Demons are also revealed to be an extension of him rather than other beings, who end up forming together to give him his giant form, which notably looks nothing like his comic book counterpart even after gaining armor. It also means that Green Lantern sacrificing his ring meant even less. Hippolyta of Earth 46 is voiced by Jennifer Hale, is the ruler of an Amazonian-ruled world where men are all kept in the dungeons, or should I say was, as she died alongside that world. John Constantine returns for his third Tomorrowverse appearance, but kinda his seventh appearance overall, voiced by Matt Ryan. Constantine notably calls himself a pariah, as he has clearly taken that role. He also reveals that he's been this homeless man for a good century before returning to his true self. I'm certain Part 3 will delve even more into the DC AMU connection, and maybe even bring those characters back. I guess we'll find out. And finally, just like Part 1, the last character to appear in this movie and is given lines is the Spectre, likely Jim Corrigan, appearing for the third time, voiced by Lou Diamond Phillips. In Part 1, there were over 60 characters who appeared with no lines. This part takes it back a bit, featuring under 40 characters, but a few of them are newly introduced. Included in that is the Earth 2 version of Solomon Grundy, who, like the Joker, looks exactly like his Earth 1 counterparts. Notably, this is somehow the fourth of 9 Tomorrowverse movies to feature Solomon Grundy in some capacity for some odd reason. Also appearing here is the Earth 2 Waylon Jones, aka Killer Croc. On Earth 1, Killer Croc was referenced, but never appeared. The Atlantean soldiers and Aquaman himself of Earth 2 return for their second appearance, only in flashbacks set before Justice Society World War II. Mon-El and the members of the Dark Circle from Earth 1's now non-existent future appear in already previously seen footage from Legion of Superheroes and are given no lines. Earth 2 Steve Trevor cameos in a flashback taking place during Justice Society World War II, right before his death, as does Barry Allen, aka The Flash of Earth 1, in his fourth and most likely final appearance. I'm not gonna lie, I kinda wish he didn't appear here because it makes his final actual appearance in the Tomorrowverse, which just isn't as fitting as his send-off and death in Part 1. He didn't even say anything here, so I wish they didn't include it. Alan Adam, aka Captain Adam of Earth 4, appears for the third time and somehow still has yet to explode. Will Everett, aka Amazing Man, likely from Earth 2, appears for the second time. The other two aforementioned Earth 17 unnamed Atomic Knights don't have any lines or distinguishing characteristics that match any of the members of the comics, so it's unclear who they are. Not technically their own character, I should probably also mention the Shadow Demons here, as they serve as the primary physical antagonists of the movie, which they end up merging together into the Anti-Monitor in the end. Batwing, who could either be David Zavimbe or more likely Luke Fox, appears for the second time and is almost certainly from Earth 2. All of the Amazonians of Earth 46, aside from a pilot remain unnamed and also died alongside their world. As previously mentioned, Dawnstar appears in this hallucination in her third, probably final appearance. And that brings us to the ending, where all the heroes are brought together to Earth 1 to fight the Anti-Monitor, and here we get our biggest chunk of lineless characters, all of whom, with a few exceptions, debuted in Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1, meaning this would be their second appearance. The Freedom Fighter's Uncle Sam from Earth X, Dinah Lance aka Black Canary of Earth 2's JSA, for her specifically it's her third appearance. Ray Terrell aka the Ray from the Freedom Fighters of Earth X, there's a few characters in a row here who are all likely from Earth 1 but not confirmed. There's Jefferson Pierce aka Black Lightning, who's likely from Earth 1, Jack Ryder aka the Creeper, Daniel Cassidy aka Blue Devil, Hank Hall and Dawn Granger aka Hawk and Dove, and Leonid Kovar aka Red Star. There's Phantom Lady from Earth X, a member of the Freedom Fighters, whose alter ego is either Sandra Jennifer or Stormy Knight, Valentina Vostok aka Negative Woman of the Doom Patrol, likely from Earth 1, Christopher Smith aka Peacemaker of Earth 4, Zatanna Zatara likely from Earth 1 in her third appearance, technically, Alec Holland aka Swamp Thing likely from Earth 1, Ted Grant aka Wildcat of the JSA of Earth 2, Lead, Platinum, Gold, Mercury, and Iron, all of the Metal Men likely Earth 1, as are Tatsu Yamashiro aka Katana and Ralph Dibny aka the Elongated Man, and finally what seems to be the legs of Eve Eden aka Nightshade from Earth 4. There are a few other characters who appear, but we can't tell who they are because we can only see the bottom of their legs and there's not enough distinguishing details to tell them apart. A few characters who were mentioned but never appeared include Earth 1's Brainiac, Earth 2's Bruce Wayne aka Batman, Earth 1's Dick Grayson, and easily most notably, and mentioned for the first time, is the Presence mentioned by the Spectre. For anyone who doesn't know, the Presence is God in the DC Universe, the creator of everything and anything that exists within DC, and who the Spectre answers to. Oh, and something that I forgot to mention is that during the arguments between the Bat Family, it was mentioned that there were other Bat Family members who are now dead. Specifically, they said they knew the risks, meaning that there are probably more than one. The most likely candidate is Jason Todd, aka Robin, the Bat Family member who is known to die. Although he never existed on Earth 2, there aren't really ever any other Bat Family members aside from Dick Grayson and Huntress on Earth 2 anyway. Damian Wayne and Batwing don't exist, so Jason Todd is very likely, Tim Drake is likely, and Batwoman is a possibility as well. And finally, that brings us to the section that features the most characters, those who were missing. What's considered here, like part 1, are characters who appeared in a trailer, had a large role in the original comic, characters whose less popular affiliated characters did appear while they didn't, and superheroes who appeared in previous Tomorrowverse movies but not here, obviously not including those who died. Let's start with the characters from previous Tomorrowverse movies because there are a lot of characters who appeared in part 1 but did not appear in part 2, all of whom will surely appear in part 3 unless of course they died in part 1. The characters included here who are likely from Earth 1 are the Atom, Speedy, Vigilante, who was only ever mentioned, Red Tornado, Metamorpho, Firestorm, Star Sapphire, Guy Gardner, the Challengers of the Unknown, which includes Red Ryan, Walter Haley, Ace Morgan, and Rocky Davis, and two Doom Patrol members, Mento and Celsius. Celsius is actually the only character that I was not able to place in the previous video. Last minute addition here to characters from Earth 1 would be the Phantom Stranger, who was only mentioned in part 1. Characters who are either confirmed to be or are likely from Earth 2 include Jay Garrick, Hourman, Dr. Midnight, Tempest, Jade, Obsidian, and Starman. Earth S characters include Captain Marvel Jr., Mary Marvel, and Uncle Marvel. There's Thunderer of Earth 7, Dollman and Black Condor from Earth X, Aqualad and Mera from Earth 146, and a few characters who don't really have any universe they're likely from, like Tomahawk, Nighthawk, and Blackhawk. It turns out that all of them have the word Hawk in them, although this does not include Hawkman, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, or Hawk. That's 7 characters in the Tomorrowverse with the word Hawk in their name. Etrigan appeared in Constantine House of Mystery, although like Zatanna, it was only as a demon masquerading as him, but he hasn't appeared anywhere since, unlike Spectre, Zatanna, and Constantine. Earth 1 Wonder Woman was mentioned in Green Lantern Beware My Power, but since then genuinely does not seem to even exist. The other heroes of Earth S all appeared in part 1, while the main one, Captain Marvel or Shazam, hasn't appeared at all. Every Metal Man appeared in both parts aside from Tin for some reason. Some Doom Patrol members appeared while the biggest ones like Robot Man, Elastigirl, and Negative Man didn't. Many Earth 2 heroes appear in both parts, while one of the more prominent ones, Alan Scott, hasn't at all. His children, Obsidian and Jade, only appeared in part 1 and will appear in part 3. It's a wonder where Alan Scott is, unless he's probably dead. The movie also features a few universes who have their own set of superheroes who just never show up. For instance, Earth 18, which features the Justice Riders with notable members like Batlash, Johnny Thunder, Madam 44, Super Chief, Tomahawk Man, Trigger Twins, and others. Earth 19 would be the Gotham by Gaslight world, potentially even the one that the movie took place in, featuring its own 19th century British version of Batman, as well as the Accelerated Man, Wonder Woman, Shrinking Man, Plastic Man, and in one version also Daniel Garrett, aka Blue Beetle. Finally is Earth 21, which is only mentioned and doesn't appear, and is unfortunately destroyed. This universe in the comics is the New Frontier world, which may very well be the one seen in the animated movie Justice League The New Frontier, which also would feature dozens of classic DC superheroes. Earth AD is also visited, and the characters who we know are from there, from Commander the Last Boy on Earth, which I probably could have mentioned in a previous category, do not appear, like Tufton and Ben Boxer. There are then, like I mentioned in my previous video, a few characters who had important roles in the original comic but don't appear, like Lila Michaels, whose role in the Crisis as Harbinger, Monitor's adopted daughter and killer, were all replaced by Supergirl. Kel Mosa was replaced as the Pariah by John Constantine. Roger Hayden was replaced as Psycho-Pirate with Charles Holstead, who in the comics is the original Psycho-Pirate but not the one who's involved in the Crisis or wears this costume. Superboy Prime doesn't seem to be appearing at all, and his role has not been replaced, with the same going for Alexander Luthor Jr. And Krona's role of being responsible for creating the multiverse isn't really being addressed, although it's possible that his role of creating the multiverse has been replaced by Barry Allen and John Constantine. And finally, following Barry's death in Part 1, Wally West aka Kid Flash took over the mantle. In this version, there is no Kid Flash. There is a Wally West who appeared in Part 1, but he never became Kid Flash, so the Flash mantle, at least on Earth 1, is not being taken up. So there you have it. Every character who appeared was mentioned or was missing from Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2. Let me know if I missed anyone, and thanks for watching.